two enemies, two legends, and one secret that was never meant to be known. History remembers them as rivals locked in holy war. Richard the Lionheart, the fearless Crusader king of England, and Saladin, the brilliant Muslim sultan of Egypt and Syria, opposing commanders, symbols of two faiths, leading their armies in the name of God. But what if the most iconic figures of the Crusades weren't really enemies at all? What if, behind the bloodshed, behind the glory, they were bound not just by war, but by a hidden agreement? This is the story of the secret deal between Saladin and Richard the Lionheart, a tale buried beneath layers of myth, politics, and silence. A deal that may have changed the fate of Jerusalem and the very meaning of the Crusades. Let's go back to the year 1191. The Third Crusade is in full motion. Jerusalem has fallen to Saladin after the disastrous loss at Hattin. The Christian world is outraged. Pope Gregory VIII calls for another holy war, and three of Europe's most powerful monarchs answer the call: the Emperor of Germany, the King of France, and Richard of England. Richard the Lionheart is everything a crusading king should be: charismatic, bold, tactically brilliant. He arrives in the Holy Land with thunder, capturing Acre after a brutal siege and defeating Saladin at Arsuf. The world watches, expecting an epic confrontation between these two titans. But that confrontation never truly happens. Over the next 2 years, Richard and Saladin play a strange game. They fight but cautiously. They attack but pull back. Jerusalem lies within Richard's reach, but he never takes it. Even Saladin seems reluctant to press his advantage. And then, the letters begin. Yes, letters. Diplomatic correspondence between Richard and Saladin, some of which still survive today, reveal a very different war. A war not just of swords and blood, but of negotiation, compromise, and something deeper. In these letters, we see two men who respected each other, perhaps even admired one another. Richard praises Saladin's honor. Saladin returns the compliment, calling Richard brave and noble. They exchange gifts, food, physicians, messages of peace between battles. At one point, Richard even proposes that Saladin's brother marry his sister, an interfaith royal marriage to unite the Muslim and Christian worlds. A stunning offer, one that could have changed everything. Why would Richard do this? Why would he, the Crusader king, sworn to reclaim Jerusalem by force, consider uniting with his enemy by blood? The answer may lie in the truth both men knew: that victory would never be absolute. Richard could not hold Jerusalem even if he captured it. He didn't have enough troops. He couldn't sustain a long occupation in hostile territory. And Saladin? He was exhausted. His army was stretched thin. He had united the Muslim world for war, but cracks were beginning to show. Both leaders understood the same truth: neither side could truly win, not without sacrificing everything. So instead, they talked. Now here's where the real secret begins. According to some Arabic chroniclers, not often quoted in Western history, Richard and Saladin reached an understanding. A secret deal. Richard would stop his advance on Jerusalem. In exchange, Saladin would allow Christian pilgrims to access the holy sites freely, without harassment. The city would remain under Muslim control, but sacred to both faiths. No grand conquest, no triumphant entry, just quiet compromise. It wasn't what the church wanted. It wasn't what the Crusaders dreamed of. But it was peace of a kind. When the official peace treaty was signed in 1192, the Treaty of Jaffa, it echoed this secret deal. Jerusalem would remain in Saladin's hands, but Christian pilgrims could visit. The Crusaders would keep a narrow strip of land along the coast. Richard would return to Europe. Saladin would hold the city. But here's the strange part. No one celebrated. Richard left the Holy Land without entering Jerusalem, not even as a pilgrim. Saladin, in turn, never marched into the Crusader ports he could have taken with ease. Both men walked away. Some say they were defeated. Others say they were wise. But whispers remain. What if the war itself had been a performance? A show of force to satisfy their people, their priests, their pride, while behind closed doors, the real battle was already over? What if Richard and Saladin, Two supposed enemies saw each other not as opposites, but as equals, as kings, as survivors, as men who knew that endless war was not holiness, but madness. There's a reason their private negotiations were never fully revealed. To the zealots of their time, this kind of diplomacy was betrayal, heresy, but to modern eyes, it might look like foresight. Richard died less than 7 years later back in Europe from an infected wound. Saladin died a year after the treaty, worn down by war and the weight of empire. Both men were praised by their people, but remembered more for their character than their victories. And maybe that's the legacy of their secret deal. Not conquest, but restraint. Not domination, but mutual respect. In a world that burned with holy fire, they dared to imagine something else. A fragile peace held together not by steel, but by understanding. History likes heroes and villains, but sometimes the real power lies in those who see beyond the myth and choose another path. The secret deal between Saladin and Richard the Lionheart is not just a forgotten footnote. It is a reminder that even in the darkest wars, even when the world demands blood, there are moments when enemies meet as men and choose peace, even if no one ever knows.